HOA tried to get my flower bed removed, but the mayor gave me an award instead. Are you seriously that dense, Carter? Karen Whitmore spat, standing on my front lawn, arms crossed like she owned the entire neighborhood. Her pinched face was twisted in a mix of superiority and rage. You think you can just plant a bunch of weeds and call it a garden? This isn't some hippie commune. This is a community, and we have rules. I wiped the sweat off my brow with the back of my gardening glove, looking up at her with an unbothered smirk. You know, Karen, I was just thinking how dull this neighborhood looks. A little color wouldn't kill anyone. Well, except your personality, maybe. Her nostrils flared. Don't be a smartass. You got your warning. Now I'm done being nice. You will rip these out, or I swear to God, I will have them removed for you. And trust me, you don't want to see the bill for that. Behind her, a few of the neighborhood watchdogs, the ones who lived for HOA meetings and had nothing better to do than spy on their neighbors, stood with smug satisfaction. A couple of them nodded approvingly. The others just waited, no doubt eager to see how far Karen was willing to take this power trip. I planted my shovel into the soil with a satisfying think and straightened. And what exactly is the problem, Karen? That I'm growing flowers? She scoffed, waving her clipboard like a weapon. Those aren't on the approved list of plants. You've got species that weren't in the original landscape plan. It's an eyesore. And don't think I haven't noticed. You let some of those grow taller than regulation height. Oh, so the real crime here is that I have tall flowers? I laughed. You do realize this is the dumbest thing to throw a tantrum over, right? Karen's face darkened. You are violating community standards. It's an issue of compliance. If we let you get away with it, then suddenly, we've got people painting their houses neon green and keeping broken-down cars on their lawns. We have standards, Carter. I took a step forward, lowering my voice just enough for the onlookers to lean in. You mean control, I said. You don't like that I did something without kissing your ass for permission first. Her mouth snapped shut, but her expression screamed murder. Oh, you think you're cute, she finally hissed. You think you're clever. But I'll tell you something, Carter. I don't lose fights like this. I don't lose. So you better rip this crap out before I come back with a fine that'll make your mortgage payment look like chump change. Suncrest Meadows looked like something out of a real estate ad. Pristine lawns, driveways pressure washed into oblivion, houses painted in perfectly coordinated neutral tones. If you so much as left your garbage can out for more than 5 minutes after pickup, the HOA would be breathing down your neck. I had moved in 6 months ago, and at first, I thought the worst I'd have to deal with was overenthusiastic neighborhood gossip, but I had underestimated the sheer cult-like devotion to uniformity. It wasn't just about keeping the lawns green or following some outdated rulebook. It was about power. Karen Whitmore and her little HOA cronies didn't just enforce rules. They wielded the rulebook like a weapon to keep everyone in line. And I had just painted a target on my back. The real battle begins. Karen turned on her heel and stomped away, but not before firing one last shot. You have until the end of the week. If those damn weeds aren't gone, don't bother fighting it. I'll make sure you regret it. I watched her go, the other HOA members trailing behind her like obedient dogs. The moment they were out of earshot, my neighbor, Mrs. Dawson, shuffled up to me. She was in her 70s, sharp-eyed, and had a habit of pretending to garden whenever HOA drama unfolded. You know she's not bluffing, she muttered. Karen's had people written up for attained colors before. She'll make your life hell. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Yeah, I figured. She hesitated before lowering her voice. You gonna fight it? I grinned, bending down to adjust one of my taller lilies. Mrs. Dawson, I said, I'm just getting started. The notice came the next morning. Not even 24 hours after our shouting match, I woke up to a bright red envelope taped to my front door like some kind of damn eviction letter. I snorted. That was fast. I turned the paper over, scanning for something, anything, about an appeals process. Nope. Just a deadline in bold. All non-compliant elements must be removed within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in further penalties. Son of a... A throat cleared behind me. I turned to see Karen standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her nose, like she was an undercover cop. Morning, she said, sickly sweet. Saw you got your notice. I gritted my teeth. Fast turnaround. What? Did you write this before you even left my yard yesterday? She smirked. Oh, don't be dramatic. The board reviewed your case and made a unanimous decision. I looked past her at the neighborhood watchdogs again, peeking from behind their curtains. A couple of them pretended to be walking their dogs. No doubt they were already calling this the flower bed scandal of the year. Bullshit, I shot back. No way. The board met and ruled on this overnight. Karen sighed, giving me a condescending tilt of her head. Look, Carter, you can stomp your feet all you want, but the rules are the rules. If you don't comply, the fines will stack. And eventually, we can legally put a lien on your property. So unless you want your mortgage company breathing down your neck, I suggest you get a shovel. I clenched my fists. She wanted me to snap. She wanted a scene. Not today, Karen. I smiled. You sure about that? She frowned. I tapped the paper. I've got 48 hours yet. Then you'll get my response. Her smirk faltered, but she recovered fast. Enjoy your last 2 days, Carter. She walked away, heels clicking against the pavement. Oh, Karen, I hope you like surprises. By noon, the second wave of attacks hit. First, a warning email. Failure to comply will result in an increase of your fine. The HOA will not tolerate defiance. Then a knock on the door. Another envelope, this one detailing a national violation. My front doormat is non-compliant. $50 fine. A doormat. They were reaching now. And then the neighbors started whispering. I caught snippets of conversation when I walked down the street. Why doesn't he just follow the rules? Karen's gonna ruin him. They could take his house, you know. No one said it to my face. No one dared. Except for one. Mrs. Dawson. She was in her garden when I walked past, yanking weeds out with a little too much force. Karen's pulling out all the stops, she muttered. I heard she's rallying the board to expedite your fines. I smirked. Good. Let her. Mrs. Dawson frowned. You're enjoying his, aren't you? Not yet, I said. But I will. Because while Karen and her army of rule-obsessed minions were busy trying to drown me in citations, I was busy building my case. Every fine. Documented. Every selective enforcement. Photographed. Every bullshit rule they bent for someone else. Filed. Karen thought she was tightening the noose. She had no idea I was handing her the rope. 48 hours later, I hadn't removed a single flower. Instead, I submitted a formal appeal, one that stopped all fines until a proper hearing could be scheduled. Karen had been banking on me rolling over. Now she was stuck waiting. But that wasn't all. By then, I had enough dirt to bury the entire HOA. And the cherry on top, I found a grant program run by the mayor's office, one that encouraged homeowners to plant native flowers to support pollinators. Oh, Karen, you screwed up. Karen's fury was delicious. I caught her storming out of the HOA office the day after I submitted my appeal, her face red as hell. You think you're clever, Carter? She hissed, jabbing a finger into my chest. I know I am, I said, grinning. And I'm just getting started. She exhaled sharply through her nose. Fine. Do you want to play games? Let's play. And with that, Karen decided to burn the entire neighborhood down to get to me. The next move came fast. I was sitting on my porch, coffee in hand, watching a butterfly dance over my criminally illegal flower bed when I heard the telltale sound of tires rolling up my driveway. City truck. Official-looking guy. Clipboard. Here we go. The inspector stepped out, looking more exhausted than anything. His name tag read H. Mendez. You Alex Carter? He asked, flipping through his paperwork. That's me. He sighed. Homeowners Association filed a formal complaint with the city, accusing you of violating local landscaping ordinances. I barely stopped myself from laughing. Really? Because last I checked, the city was literally giving out grant money for native flower beds. Mendez rubbed his temples. Yeah, I saw that too. But Karen Whitmore's been breathing down our necks about this case, threatening to file additional complaints if we don't enforce community standards. I folded my arms. And you? He gave me a look that screamed I don't get paid enough for this shit. Look, man, I see this kind of crap all the time. HOAs love pretending they have more power than they do. I'm supposed to check if your garden violates any city codes. Be my guest. Mendez walked around my yard, took a few pictures, and muttered under his breath before returning. Yeah, no violations. He slapped his clipboard shut. I'll file the report. But I'd be careful, Karen's pissed. She's gonna come at you hard. I grinned. Let her. Mendez chuckled. You know, I love it when people fight back against these HOA tyrants. Call me if she tries anything illegal. He handed me his card and drove off. Karen had officially lost the legal battle. But that didn't mean she was done fighting. The gloves came off that evening. Karen had gathered her loyalists, 5 or 6 of the most enthusiastic HOA enforcers, and went door to door. By the next morning, my neighborhood was in chaos. Half the residents were parroting Karen's talking points, whispering about Carter ruining our community. The other half, starting to push back. At the mailbox, I ran into Jim, one of the older guys on the block. He looked nervous. Karen's been calling homeowners, he said, voice low, trying to rally a petition against you. I raised a brow. A petition? For what? To restore order, or some bullshit? He shook his head. But some of us are sick of her crap. This isn't the first time she's pulled something like this. That got my attention. Oh, Jim glanced over his shoulder. Couple years back, she tried finding a disabled veteran because his wheelchair rampant matched the approved exterior colors. I clenched my jaw. Oh, and Mrs. Dawson? Jim added. She got fined for putting up a seasonal wreath on her door. It disrupted uniformity. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't just about me. This was a pattern. And Karen, she was about to regret making it personal. The escalation came 2 days later. I walked outside to find a tow truck idling in front of my house. 3 HOA board members stood nearby, watching like vultures. And Karen, smirking like she'd already won. What's this? I asked, stepping off my porch. Karen folded her arms. Since you refused to comply, the HOA has voted to hire a third-party service to remove the offending flower bed. I barked out a laugh. You're towing my flowers? Not towing, Karen said, all fake professionalism. Extracting. She turned to the truck driver. Proceed. The guy hesitated. Lady, this is a tow truck. I remove S. I don't do gardens. Karen's eye twitched. You were hired to remove a non-compliant structure. The driver scratched his head. Yeah, I thought it was like a fence or something. I'm not going to roll up on some dude's daisies like I'm reposing a sedan. I smirked. Sounds like a you problem, Karen. Her face turned red as a stop sign. This is far from over, she seethed. You will regret this. She stormed off, her lackeys scrambling after her. And just like that, Karen had played her final, desperate card. Because while she was trying to rip out flowers, I was making phone calls. The neighborhood meeting was packed. Karen had called it herself, hoping to stage a public execution of my flower bed. She wanted the whole community there, an audience for my humiliation, a show of force. Instead, she was about to get wrecked. I stood in the middle of the HOA's rented rec center, surrounded by rows of metal folding chairs. The entire board was lined up at the front, Karen in the middle, her eyes burning holes through me. She banged her gavel like she was a damn judge. This meeting will now come to order. The room hushed. She cleared her throat. We are here to discuss the ongoing violations committed by Mr. Carter, who has refused to comply with HOA regulations. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some are sympathetic, others just hungry for drama. Karen picked up a stack of printed emails and waved them in the air. In response to this blatant defiance, the board has drafted a motion for legal action against Mr. Carter, seeking further fines and possible enforcement through property liens. She slapped the papers down on the table. This community does not tolerate lawlessness. I waited. Let her feel powerful. Let her enjoy it. Then I took a single step forward. You done? Her lips pressed into a thin line. For now. I smiled. Cool. Then, let's talk about your violations. A wave of whispers ran through the crowd. Karen frowned. Excuse me? She scoffed. I held up my phone and cast the screen to the projector behind her. And just like that, it was my turn to speak. The screen lit up with photo evidence, a slideshow of every house in the neighborhood that had the same violations as mine. Unapproved plants, tall shrubs, different mulch colors. I turned to Karen, grinning. Weird, right? I counted at least 12 houses with unauthorized landscaping. And yet, only one of us got a fine. Karen's jaw was clenched. Click. Next slide. A copy of the city's grant program. The one that encouraged homeowners to plant native flowers. Click. Next slide. An email from the mayor's office confirmed that my flower bed was eligible for city funding and was not in violation of any actual laws. I turned back to Karen. So tell me, Karen, if my garden is so illegal, why do I think it's worth a grant? The room exploded. Karen stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. That's irrelevant. She snapped. The HOA rules. Oh, we're getting to those. Click. Next slide. Archive complaints from past homeowners. Click. Next slide. A 2018 email thread showed Karen trying to fine a disabled veteran for his wheelchair ramp. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Karen went pale. I raised an eyebrow. What was that about community standards? Click. Final slide. A recorded voicemail from one of Karen's own board members, admitting that Karen handpicked who to fine based on whether she liked them or not. I hit play. Karen's voice crackled through the speakers. Listen, I don't care if old man Dawson complains. We're not fining Linda for the hedge. We're going after Carter. He's an outsider. He needs to learn how things work here. Silence. Pure, damning silence. Then came the chaos. You manipulative, power-hungry. Karen, you can't just. Is this really how the HOA's been running? I crossed my arms and let the mob turn on her. Karen's smug facade addition. She turned toward her board members, looking for support. But now, they looked just as horrified as everyone else. One of them, a guy named Paul, who had always looked uncomfortable at these meetings, stood up. I had no idea about this, he stammered. If this is true, Karen, I can't support you. Karen's eyes went wild. Paul, don't be an idiot. This is. But Paul wasn't listening. He turned to the room. I motioned to remove Karen Whitmore from her position as HOA president. Effective immediately. The cheers that erupted shook the walls. Karen turned red. You can't do this to me. I run his board. I built this HOA. The gavel slammed down. Another board member, one of Karen's or allies, spoke next. All in favor? Hands went up. I raised mine last. For the drama. Karen creamed. I mean, full-on shrieked. You think this changes anything? I'll have you all audited. I'll call the city. Paul sighed. Karen, you need to leave. Security. Yes, actual hired security. Walk toward her. Karen's final move? Knocking over the HOA's water pitcher and storming out. Checkmate. Karen was gone. Fired. Humiliated. Stripped of power. But she didn't go quietly. 2 days after the HOA coup, Karen tried one last desperate move, filing an official complaint with the city, claiming I had illegally tampered with public property by planting flowers too close to the sidewalk. That's right. She tried to weaponize concrete. I got the notice in my mailbox and laughed out loud, because Karen forgot one thing. The mayor himself had already backed my garden. So I picked up the phone. The mayor's office, how can I help you? Yeah, hey, this is Alex Carter. You might remember me. I'm the guy Karen Whitmore's been trying to crucify over flowers. The flower guy. The woman on the line laughed. Oh, trust me, we remember. What's up? I explained Karen's final Hail Mary play, and within an hour I got a call back. From the mayor himself. This is loot nonsense, he said, sounding as pissed as I hoped he would. I'll handle it. And handle it he did. Because that afternoon, an official statement was sent to the entire neighborhood, signed by the mayor. The city of Fairview proudly supports efforts to promote sustainability and native plant growth. The Homeowners Association has overstepped its bounds by penalizing Mr. Carter's participation in a city-endorsed program. Effective immediately, any fines issued about this matter are considered void. Additionally, we will be reviewing the HOA's compliance practices. I read it twice just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. Karen had fought like hell to destroy me, and now the city was investigating her. I sat on my porch, sipping my coffee, watching as neighbors came outside to read the notice. There were murmurs, a few nervous looks, some laughter, but the best part? The sound of Karen's for sale sign being hammered into her lawn. Next morning. Game over. 2 weeks later, the neighborhood looked different. Karen was gone. The HOA, now under new leadership, wasn't asking every resident like some kind of suburban surveillance squad. And best of all, other neighbors started planting their gardens. One by one, the beige, uniform yard started changing. A row of daisies popped up in front of the Miller's house. Mrs. Dawson put up a bird feeder. Hell, even Jim, the most HOA-fearing man I'd ever met, added some wildflowers near his porch. Karen had spent years keeping this neighborhood in line, forcing everyone into the same boring mold. And in 1 month, her legacy was erased. I was sitting in my yard, admiring the small rebellion of color, when Mrs. Dawson came over. She folded her arms and smirked. "You know you started all this, right?" I grinned. "Yeah, and I don't feel bad about it at all." She chuckled, then held out an envelope. "What's this?" She raised a brow. "You don't check your mail, do you?" I opened it and felt my stomach drop. It was an official invitation from the mayor's office. "You are cordially invited to the annual Fairview Community Excellence Award Ceremony, where you will be honored for your contributions to neighborhood beautification and sustainability." I blinked. I read it again. I looked up. "You've got to be kidding me." Mrs. Dawson just grinned. I had spent months fighting to keep my garden from being bulldozed into oblivion. And now, I was getting a damn worried. The night of the ceremony, I walked into City Hall and immediately felt out of place. Suits, dresses, fancy decorations. People who probably didn't spend their mornings arguing over flowers with 65-year-old tyrants. A staff member guided me to my seat, front row GHT next to city officials. I was officially in the big leagues now. The mayor took the stage. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate those who have made our community a better place. People who have challenged the status quo and stood up for what's right." I could feel people looking at me. I had never been the guy who got awards for anything. I was the guy who got fined, who got yelled at by Karen Whitmore. And yet here I was. And now, the mayor continued, "I'd like to recognize someone who proved that a small act of defiance can inspire real change. Please welcome Alex Carter." Applause. Real thunderous applause. I walked up to the stage, shaking the mayor's hand, and took the plaque he handed me. It was heavy. Official. It read, "Presented to Alex Carter for outstanding community contributions and dedication to neighborhood beautification." The mayor chuckled. "Anything you'd like to say?" I stared at the plaque, then out at the audience. I spotted some familiar faces. Mrs. Dawson, Jim, a few other neighbors, and at the very back, arms crossed, is Karen Whitmore. She hadn't moved away yet. She was watching me win. The poetic justice of that moment almost made me laugh. I stepped up to the mic. "I think I'll keep this short," I said, voice steady. "A few months ago, I was told my flowers were a problem." I held up the plaque. "Guess not." Laughter. Cheers. The mayor patted my shoulder, and I stepped off the stage. I had won. Not just the award. Not just the fight against the HOA. I had hanged the neighborhood. Karen had spent years trying to control this place. And now, her reign was dead. All because of a flower bed.